Welcome back to Pissed Up Ranch. On this video we're going to continue working on our race flathead. This time we are modifying the oil pan. First thing up is the oil pickup. Doesn't with the new oil pump is goes a little deeper than the pan does, so we need to modify the bottom of the pan. And then once that's done, we're going to go ahead and do make it a proper race pan. Put a baffle in it with a trap door, and no race oil pan works without a windage tray. So we'll go ahead and make a custom windage tray for this pan, for this application, and I'll show you how I do that. Enjoy. Now I'm going to do some sizing and figuring out how I want to do the windage tray. Okay, I've made a template here. Rotating the engine over, it does a good job of clearing.
This is the most mighty haberdashery beneath the surface of Alexandria. But yeah, between you and not both, like, you'd have to pour. You do not see anything sticking out, but what you do notice is at the top of two of these stacks, dark ashen gray skin, little humanoid, but face with a pointed nose.
So we have a basic shape here, like most rudimentary, roughly 16 inches long. So we need this length by 16. Now the challenge is we need to then put a profile. Need to change the profile thus that it'll will catch and allow the oil to shift through, while keeping the worst of the tornado, which is the crank spinning in here, from kicking up the oil with just air and frothing it up. That's the point of a windage tray. On the oil pan, we take our piece here, and it actually fits tightly on this front section here. These two cylinders, these front cylinders here, completely under this. So that leaves us with a decision. Do we not extend the windage tray up to this to cover this portion here, and then just do this back and let this do what it's going to do, since there is like no oil can accumulate in this socket here? Or do we go ahead and drop this down another half inch or so, do some surgery here, and then just move this up to allow the windage tray to come all the way up? I'm inclined to not do that at this juncture, and I'll tell you why. Because like I said, within this cavity, this here, no oil is going to be here. It's going to get slung down, and it might get kicked up again, but it's going to get it's going to drain this way relatively quickly. So I don't think we need to do that. So our windage tray only needs to cover this much. So that's the second hole here to here. So let's measure that, and that makes our windage tray a little bit easier, a little bit simpler. So we need to go 12¼ inches. And that'll also help with a little bit of slosh. 15 and change. I'll make it 16 and then trim it up from there. From the looking at the front, the engine rotates clockwise. Okay, of course, first things first is to lay it out on a piece of sheet metal. Our measurements we figured out, and then go ahead and cut out the piece from some good old-fashioned 20 gauge sheet metal. Next, we'll go ahead and mark some guidelines for the bead rolling I'm going to do next up to get the profile I am looking for. On my guidelines, I use the bead roller and a step down wheel to go ahead and put my lines in. And here you are, the basic shape, fine tuning it, getting it worked out how I want it to look. Starting to fit up pretty good, checking clearances, trimming some stuff out. Now, I have to make a allowance for the oil pickup, and this is a tedious process of trim a little, check, trim a little, check, trim a little bit, check. And the opening gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, good times. Once I'm happy with the size of the opening, actually not happy isn't the correct term. It's way big, and this bothered me throughout the whole process. But I went ahead and rounded the lip over so that I added a little bit rigidity in that area. Now I'm doing a final check, and how's it looking? I think it's looking pretty good. It's taking shape. I'm getting the general profile I want. So, getting ready for the next step, which is to cut the actual openings. Now, it's kind of a trade-off on the openings to maintain some form of structural strength, while at the same time giving a clear path for the oil to be slung through. So I figured out where I wanted my to be continuous and where I wanted my slots, and drilled stop holes at each end using a good old-fashioned drill. Of course, the trick in all of this is to know where in between which holes to cut and which ones I want to keep, and then cleaning it all up once it's all done. With my stop holes in place, next step was to get in with the death wheel and go ahead and cut the slits for the where the actual louvers are going to be. This is, of course, the hard way to make a louver, but it worked. Ended up having to do a lot of fiddling with different tools afterwards to open up the louvers more without distorting the metal too much and without messing up too bad. There's also a fair amount of deburring that'll save you the tedium of watching, but it happened. Here I'm fine-tuning the openings on using some tools on the anvil, and this is kind of a final step to try and clean it up and make it a little more pretty. Okay, it's not as pretty, it's not as refined as a aftermarket one you can buy from one of the big names. We've done a little more engineering on the subject, a little more test and development. However, this should work very well. But you can see, as the crank whips past, the oil should come off and go right in here. Well, the air displacement that's pulsing shouldn't be able to kick up a lot of oil under here. Now, this hole here is where the oil pickup goes. So the pickup's suspended in oil, so it will have access to the oil that's right here, but hopefully, you know, there's only so much you can do, so. keep refining this a little bit, and then start working on the modifications of the pan itself. So this is looking down. You can see how close it is to the crank, and that's what you want. You want it pretty close, but not so close it touches. And its job is, as each part of the crank whips by, oil is getting flung off from out of the bearings, and you want to capture that and have an expeditious route for it to then drop down into the pan, while at the same time minimizing that tornado of air in there moving around, whipping, to keep it from whipping up. Now you can see here we got, you know, we can only cover so much of it because of the oil pickup. And if you recall, I attempted with this, you know, in the thing to try and get it so that I could, you know, loop it this way or something like that. But the fact of the matter is, because of the edge, the oil pump and the edge, it has to come in pretty high and then down and then over. So, but that is the windage tray for now. But now I still need to modify the pan here, and so that the pickup, which goes right here, you can see. So I'm going to move this section here over. Here I am laying out where I'm going to go ahead and cut up this beautiful pan I took so much time painting and making pretty. You know how it is, you know, no sooner do you get it done than it's time to ruin it. The whole idea was to move the one step all the way over to create a deeper area, and then weld it up. Okay, before, when this was on in this area, it was down here, and you can see it rocking back and forth on the pickup. So, but you can see here, that's about the right distance you want off the bottom for the pickup. In fact, maybe even a little more might be a good idea. The screen is just below this lip when it's here, so about 1 finger width is pretty good. And then it's got a little, that means right here at the drain, it's still the lowest point, so it should completely drain. And when we put this in back in, we'll be good. Now we'll have to fill up little strips on the sides to but that'll almost look stock, other than we got a lip up, a bloop bloop, kind of a wave action coming up here, but that's fine. I think that'll be cool. So, one of the things I was concerned about was underneath the pickup here, it's going to be suspended in oil, and the crank underneath it is going to be able to whip up the oil just above it. But I needed to make a window to be able to fit the oil pan on. And now that I've had the opportunity to look underneath here, if I put this, which I trimmed out of my pan already, straighten it out, I can put it underneath relatively close to the crank, put maybe some slits in it, and it'll allow the oil to drain through it, and I can attach it to the bottom of the pickup, and then my windage tray will be more complete. It won't cover the front of the engine here because the oil pan's too shallow. It'll only cover from here, but it'll at least cover back to here and cover the back 4 cylinders as well. So, you know, I think that's an important improvement. So I'm going to figure out that and work on that now. And of course, as lather, rinse, repeat. Made all the same steps, getting this piece ready here to be attached to underneath the oil pickup, or actually above the oil pickup, to close up that gap a little bit and reduce the chance that the crank is going to whip up a froth. Once I had it working the way I wanted it to, more or less in the same way, I went ahead and made a little step piece to get the distance, welded it onto my little pseudo wind tray, and then welded it to the bottom of the pickup, or the top of the pickup. And going ahead and just bolting it back on where it goes. Make sure everything works. Make sure the crank clears. It's close to the crank, but the crank still clears. That it's a good position. Now, a nice thing here is, before I weld this up, this would be a good time to go ahead and figure out my baffle in here. And now we go ahead and make the paper template for the baffle and cut it out of the same stock we made the windage tray out of, some good 20 gauge steel, and start fabricating up the trap door that we need to do. And here I am welding the hinges, the hinged trap door onto my baffle. Okay, for those of you who might not know, in racing oil pans, to control oil slosh, you want as much flow towards the end pickup as possible, and then limit the flow away from the pickup when you're doing high accelerations, whether you're turning, braking, or driving forward, pulling away forward. So I created this baffle with this trap door in it. Now it's crucial that this thing flops naturally on its own, because it's relying on its own weight to pull it kind of closed. When there's acceleration, you know, the oil needs to be able to flow around it this way easily. And then when it, you know, acceleration, what's going to happen is this will pull back and the oil will be brought this way. And then on deceleration, this will slam closed. Oil will pile up against it. This lip here is to redirect it back away and create some rigidity along here, since this gets pretty thin. So, you got that. That should work. That should hold. So, it's a nice snug fit into this part of the oil pan. Which is what you want. So then the next step is to go ahead and weld it in. there we go. We have complete race oil pan with our windage tray all ready to go back in on the engine. We are getting closer. Hopefully soon we'll be able to get the remaining back order items and get them installed on the engine so we can fire this thing real quick here on the engine stand. And if you like what we're doing here at the Pit Stop Ranch, want to see more content like this, it really helps if you hit the old like button. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. It really helps us out a lot. Until next time, have a race-tastic day.